For this episode of Costume as Character, I spoke with Heartstopper costume designer Adam D about his work on season 2. Before we dive into that, if you want more Costume as Character videos, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. One of the key elements of the Heartstopper show is the loyal fan base that came out of the webcomics and then the graphic novels by Alice Oseman. And she's also a showrunner on the TV show itself. So there's a lot of continuity between the original comics and what you're seeing on the screen. For Adam, he had to be very careful about not taking the comics as gospel, because sometimes there's things that work on a page that don't translate well onto screen. He still, however, wanted to be savvy about the things that the people who read the comics loved and incorporate them in other ways into the final vision of the show.
Obviously, it's so lovely doing Charlie. Like, there's a bit of an inner indie boy in me from teenage years. So those kind of like the knits and everything and the skinny black jeans. But I think Nick and Charlie, they're so ingrained in the culture of the Heartstopper fans. Mm-hmm. From the novels, you know, there's an expectation of them having to resemble that in some way. You couldn't just start from scratch and do whatever you wanted with Charlie. Right. It's got to be Charlie that the fans love, and they love and are as protective of Charlie as Nick is in the show, you know, so that's really important. And then obviously Nick had that kind of like the sporty rugby kind of lad culture that we've got over here, but again trying to resemble things in the book but bring what Kit brings to the character as well, and kind of like changing it slightly so it feels real, because I think you've got to do something that's from 2D in the book. You're trying to create something real and it doesn't always translate in the way that it is in the drawings. Like Charlie's coat in season 1, the duffel coat, that's quite present in all the illustrations, and that was actually relatively easy to find, something that worked, and tried it on, and we knew we were happy from straight away. But with Kit, I think we tried various different things, and I don't know, trying to find something that just replicated the drawing didn't seem to be working in real life as much for some reason. Right. And then, so rather than having this great big kind of like puffer coat with the massive hood, we ended up settling on the blue Vans jacket, I think, that he wears in season 1 of school, and that just worked better. It just felt more Nick for some reason. But we did manage to get the big puffer coat in later on for the snow scenes, which replicated some of the drawings and you know, kept the fans happy.
Yeah, so it's a little like Easter egg touchstone.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely been one of the things. It's like we haven't, obviously you've got to honour the work and the illustrations, but we don't think, right, we've got to completely copy it all the way. So when we do add those elements in, they are like Easter eggs, and the fans just absolutely love it. And it's nice to see them go, oh wow, that's that scene, they put that in, amazing.
Right. One element that separates Heartstopper from other teen drama shows that we're seeing sort of in proliferation on our screens, which is great, is the specificity of its costume. And it actually brought to mind for me skins. As an American teenager, we actually got Skins on BBC America, and I remember watching it and thinking about how grounded all of those looks were, and they were familiar to me as well, but they also felt very British and a little alien to me at the time. And I think Heartstopper does a really good job at crafting the same thing. It's got a really specific element of time and place for these teenagers. And that's in sharp contrast to something like Sex Education, which is a little more amorphous in the way that it's costuming its characters. It's making them feel more universal, so obviously people can relate to that. With Heartstopper, it's so grounded in this very specific time and place that too allows you entry to empathizing with these characters, because they're teenagers and they're agonizing over the clothing choices that they're making. And that's something I think that most of us can relate to.
I think actually what you said about Sex Education, I remember watching that and thinking, is this Wales? Is this American? I think reading Heartstopper and looking at Alice's drawings, that school uniform really cemented UK school, you know, and I think to do that from that point of view was quite different, because I don't know that that's been done before. Like a lot of shows sometimes seem to pander to like an American style when it comes to school stuff. Yeah, I think so, to just bring something that kind of looked, I don't know, kind of reminded me of my experience at school and teenagers coming out and then that expression of style then in your personal clothing, I guess, then when you have those kind of like strengths of character and moments, the way the whole show kind of looks, I think obviously there's a slight and heightened reality to the program, which really helps because you've got the animations, the way the music is, those Heartstopper moments. So that kind of lent it to a style that could be a little bit more experimental, maybe pushing the boundaries with the style. But I think with each individual one, it comes back to the clues from their characters from the scripts, really, and the casting, you know, what Alice writes, and then the way those actors' performances are. I think that gives you the clues to finding all of their individual characters.
Heartstopper is really grounded in the specificity of being a teenager in the UK in the 2020s, and that's reflected in the clothes that they wear. They're not wearing high-end fashion. It's not Gossip Girl. They're not wearing those marquee designer brands they're buying at Next or H&M or these kind of high street stores while still trying to express themselves creatively. And I think that also really clues you into, even though we're not naming necessarily a specific city or town or village, it feels like a small city, like Reading. And that also makes it feel accessible for people who aren't based in London or a city like New York, where, you know, again, Gossip Girl. I don't know why I keep talking about Gossip Girl. That clues you into a very different sort of lifestyle, and it brings to mind a whole different set of emotionally charged teenage development. And the stuff that the characters go through in Gossip Girl is so wild and unattainable in a way. It's very different to something like Heartstopper, where the emotional journey that these characters are going on is so grounded and it's so real. And it's something that I think a lot of older folks are jiving with because we didn't see it. We didn't see that growing up, that kind of coming to terms with queer identity that wasn't laden in homophobia and wasn't laden in stress and anxiety. So when you take all of that together, the show becomes very grounded in a humble reality. And I think that is what makes it so touching. Heartstopper has many great fashion moments where the clothes really take center stage and are very important to the emotional beats of the show. One example of that is the prom scene, which is in the finale of season 2 of Heartstopper. And I asked Adam about creating the wardrobe specifically for Elle and Tao.
Obviously, that we had ideas from mood boards and directors' mood boards about it looking slightly kind of fun and ravey and all of those things. So I kind of had this UV idea was quite a nice idea to do something transformational, but in a different way to season 1. So you put it on the mood board and then you think, oh, I've got to achieve this now. How are we going to do this? But the DOP was so lovely and really excited by the idea and trying to make that work. So we were able to camera test it really early on because we had to establish those outfits quite early in the season when we did the exterior scenes. And then we didn't actually revisit the prom until the end of the schedule.
Right.
So we then had that time to kind of play around with the paint effect, but you couldn't go back on what you'd set up for the continuity of those outfits way at the beginning of filming. So there was quite a lot of pressure on that to get it right. But again, then once we got nearer to the prom, we did further camera testing and lighting testing. So yeah, it was a joint effort on a lot of departments. And then obviously makeup put in the extra hearts and things. So we camera tested that as well. So yeah, it was really a lot of work from a lot of departments.
Obviously, one of the biggest moments for clothes in the show is when Darcy finds and then later tries on her suit for prom. And that was a really interesting character journey because Darcy has throughout the show really been very kind of grounded in her sexuality. She's very proud. And in that finding of that suit, that's the culmination for her. She finds this suit and she feels at home in her skin. And that is really, really important. And it's something that a lot of teenagers are searching for, regardless of their sexual or gender identities. But when you add to that another layer of self-awakening and self-understanding, that becomes really important. That is bookended or juxtaposed by the reaction that her mother has when she sees Darcy trying on that suit. I mean, the moment speaks for itself, really. The mother says, "You look like a lesbian," and in a derogatory way. And that is the crux of that issue. It's so clear there the way that how we dress ourselves reflects our identity, but also helps us achieve it and grow into it and own it. And that's a moment where Darcy's being denied that opportunity.
Actually, weirdly, the prom suit wasn't too difficult to find. I'd kind of gone into some vintage stores and I'd found it, and it kind of more of a man's prom jacket, because Darcy is not going to wear something ultra feminine, and she's less restricted by, I think, gender in clothing, has a more comfortable way of just dressing. This is me, this is Darcy. I think we'd gone through a point throughout Paris and everything where her wardrobe's just quite chaotic, really. It's colourful and it's exciting, and she's just grabbed stuff. And then there's a shift when we come back from Paris and she's in this really muted, dull hoodie. It's just kind of like a bit embarrassment at what she did in the Paris hotel getting drunk. But that fear of going home, we start to learn more of that about her.
Yeah.
And then I think that prom suit then was just really cementing together Tara and Darcy. Like you say, there's the fact that the lining matched. So that just kind of really worked. We'd already found an idea for a dress for Tara as well. Hadn't tried it on at that point. But for that to work, those two purples were just really easy. And Kizzy just has a real sense of how Darcy dresses and brings a lot to that character, like the idea of the Crocs. That was a suggestion from Kizzy. So it is kind of quite collaborative, I think, with all of those characters. It's not always my choices. There is a lot of my choices, but there's choices and suggestions that come from the cast members, and they all have their ideas on the characters. So it's kind of quite important to let some of those flow in, so it's kind of a bit natural.
I was really excited by the Paris trip for a lot of reasons. It's Paris, firstly. Also, I thought it was very interesting to think about what teenagers pick for a trip like this, because they're obviously very conscious about choosing their outfits in general, literally teenagers, but also the characters on the show. In the case of Paris, what all of the characters choose reflects their identities and their growth in ways that I think you might not, you would subconsciously pick up on because you've watched the whole show and you're seeing the characters move through these spaces. But to actually sit down and ask Adam why he had certain characters pick certain things really illuminated for me how important those wardrobes really are.
There's that element that we all do when you go on a holiday. You curate your best outfits and you just want to look amazing. And obviously characters like Elle and Imogen are maybe going to go for that more than someone like Charlie, who might just be more comfortable in just what he wears. That's just him. When we started the season and you kind of look at where their all personal growth is, with Eros at one point, we'd sort of said that experience in Paris has to grow them slightly. And so the coach journey there and the coach journey back were kind of like these bookends to that, and what happens after Paris and how they appear older at the queer exhibition. So I think throughout Paris, you had to see that exploration of each of their styles a bit more to kind of get to that point. Elle, for instance, at the beginning of season 1, she is more, trying to hide a little bit when she first starts at the new school, like not trying to sort of say too much about herself. And then obviously as she gets stronger in herself and her character and she meets the lesbians, Tara and Darcy, she grows and grows. So then by this point, before Paris, she's had the interview to go to the Lambert School.
Yeah.
So she meets all these characters that maybe she feels she fits in with more, who are more expressive about themselves. So like then when she goes to Paris, she's got this love for 1970s and vintage clothing. And she's like, right, I'm taking all of that with me and I'm going to put my best clothes on.
Right.
I think that's something we did definitely with Imogen. But we saw a lot of tourists actually walking around Paris kind of addressing that experience.
Right.
I think that really worked with Imogen.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Costume is Character. Let us know all of your thoughts about Heartstopper Season 2's best looks in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.